Outside of this one church town, there's a gold dirt road to a whole lot of nothing. Got a deed to the land, but it ain't my ground. This is God's country. We pray for rain and thank Him when it's falling, 'cause it brings a grain and a little bit of money. We put it back in a plate, I guess that's why they call it God's country. I saw the light in a sunrise, sitting back in a 40 on the muddy riverside, getting baptized in holy water and shine with the dogs running. Saved by the sound of a pin-found Dixie whistle in the wind, that'll get you heaven bound. The devil went down to Georgia, but he didn't stick around. This is God's country. We turn the dirt and work until the week's done. We take a break and break bread on Sunday, then do it all again, 'cause we're proud to be from God's country. I saw the light in a sunrise, sitting back in a 40 on the muddy riverside, getting baptized in holy water and shine with the dogs running. Saved by the sound of a pin-found Dixie whistle in the wind, that'll get you heaven bound. The devil went down to Georgia, but he didn't stick around. This is God's country. God's country. I don't care what my headstone reads or what kind of pine wood box I end up in. When it's my time, lay me 6 feet deep in God's country. I saw the light in a sunrise, sitting back in a 40 on the muddy riverside, getting baptized in holy water and shine with the dogs running. Saved by the sound of a pin-found Dixie whistle in the wind, that'll get you heaven bound. The devil went down to Georgia, but he didn't stick around. This is God's country. Yeah, I saw the light in a sunrise, sitting back in a 40 on the muddy riverside, getting baptized in holy water and shine with the dogs running. Saved by the sound of a pin-found Dixie whistle in the wind, that'll get you heaven bound. The devil went down to Georgia, but he didn't stick around. This is God's country.
And I'll tell you, I needed to hear that song. Sometimes, Ruben, you go to the gym. You went to the gym today. We were told to you. You mentioned that you went and you sent me the picture. And sometimes there's a certain song, Ruben. You know that when it comes on, it just gives you that extra energy.
Yeah.
And this is that song to me. And right now, first of all, everybody that's watching, thank you very much. Today, we're going to change it up a little bit, and you'll find out why. Today's episode is going to be a deep episode. I mean, a very deep episode. Everybody that's watching, I'm not going to mention everybody like I always do, because you'll see. It's a deep episode. And with that said, before we get started, I want to do in memory of this young lady, Chelsea Bollinger. She was a community service coordinator for the city of Menifee. Everybody that I talked about this young lady, they say that she was an angel. I talked to somebody today that said, David, every time I would see her, I would feel the presence of God with her, and I would see an angel through her eyes. I mean, this young lady, for I believe over 8 years, she volunteered and was also a coordinator with Special Olympics. Well, 2 days ago, her name is Chelsea Bollinger. She's the daughter of Pete Bollinger. Pete Bollinger is a retired detective sergeant with the Santa Ana Police Department, did over 25 years or 30 years with them. He's also the CEO and president of Police and Fire Publishing. He co-wrote the book When the Music Stops, the Pain Begins with Benny Cruz and I. And this man has a heart of gold. He's a good man. He's also a producer. He produced, I believe, the Kilroy movie. Maybe I might be wrong on that one, but I think I'm right. But I know for a fact that he produced the Mundo movie. He's produced a lot of movies. And his daughter, who was 33 years old 2 days ago, went to bed that night. She lived a block away from his house with her boyfriend. And they were getting ready to have their marriage. They're going to get married. She went to bed and she never woke up. And early that morning, Pete got a call from the boyfriend. By the time he got there, paramedics, police, everybody was there, and she never woke up. And with that said, Chelsea, I know I never met you, but my heart is broken. My heart is broken because I have 2 daughters and I have a son. And I could just imagine how Pete is doing today. And I just want to tell you, Pete, that we love you and we're praying for you, brother. And Chelsea, rest in paradise. You were God's angel here on earth, and you are God's angel now in heaven. With that said, guys, let's give a special toast to Chelsea Bollinger. Rest in peace, in paradise, God's angel. Salud.
Salud.
Wow. When I heard about this, I didn't know her, but today yesterday, I spoke to several people. Today, I talked to several people, and everybody that I talked to about her, like I said, Ruben and Bobby, that she was definitely an angel. And I could just imagine what Pete is going to. But our prayers are with him. Guys, we're going to change it up too. We're not going to talk about what we're drinking today. And the reason why, what we're smoking today, the reason why is because the subject matter that we're going to get into right now, oh my God, it is deep, very deep. And without further ado, Bobby, let's introduce Ruben. Before Bobby introduces you, I just want to say that we want to welcome you to our family. You are now our chaplain for the gray line, the story behind the blue line, and Ash Wednesday. If any of you that are watching the show ever need prayers, please text us. Please pray for me, and I will notify Ruben. And Ruben is a man of God. He's a man of honor, a man of respect. He will get your prayers. We will pray for you too, but you will get it directly from our chaplain. So, Ruben, once again, thank you, brother. You're not only the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department chaplain, but you're our chaplain too.
Thank you very much. I'm honored.
Yeah, thank you, brother. With that said, Bobby, tell us who Ruben is.
Well, Ruben, again, welcome to the family. Bienvenido.
Thank you.
And without further ado, I want to introduce our guest today. Our guest today is retired Los Angeles sheriff. He's a former detective sergeant from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. Ruben has a vast experience with the LASD, with LA Sheriff's Department. He worked narcotics. He worked in gangs. He worked in patrol. He retired after 31 years of service. And during his time, Ruben specialized a lot in offering his services through his faith at working as a chaplain. And what he does is, obviously, as a cop, he responded to many incidences, hundreds and hundreds of critical incidents, from suicides, drive-by shootings, sexual assaults, to domestic violence calls. You know, most of this stuff that really can affect us, maybe not at the time, but later on down the road. So what Ruben's going to want to do, he's going to show up today. He's going to talk to us about his experience, where now, after retirement, he is now volunteering to be he works for the LA East Los Angeles Command as their sheriff's chaplain. So want to thank you, after all your years of service working with the LA Sheriff's Department and your continued service. We're very grateful. I'm sure the community that you serve is very grateful. Welcome.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate it. Yeah, it was just a calling, and I felt this tug in my heart, and I could no longer just ignore it. So I know that my beloved department is going through some tough times. The deputies they have it much harder than any of us ever had it. You know, the climate that in law enforcement has changed drastically. You know, I mean, you can go back to several incidents. You know, maybe going back to Ferguson and all the BLM stuff and whatnot. But it's definitely not the same being out there on patrol than when we were working. And but these guys need support, and I wanted to let them know that, you know, and I asked to go back to East LA. They already have a chaplain there, but I wanted to go back because that was my home as a deputy and as a sergeant, and I just wanted to serve. I wanted to serve God by serving them, and they know that. Hopefully, and that's what I'm trying to do, is build my trust, build the trust in them that they know that, so they know that they can come to me with anything. And I think that the fact that I've done the job, it lends credence to what they're going through. And so far, I've had numerous guys reach out, and of course, I can't discuss any of the things we talk about, but it's all confidential. And you know, if you're out there watching the show and you feel that calling to maybe go back and give back, many of you who've served in law enforcement that watch the show, and you feel a calling, then reach out to your local department or your former agency and see what you can do. I know that the LA sheriffs are looking for more chaplains, so I'm trying to help recruit. So anyway.
Hey, Ruben, let me ask you a quick question, because as you know, I put in for a chaplain program here in Hillsborough County, and I was shut down because I'm not an ordained minister, number one. Number two, I'm not a pastor of a church. Mm-hmm. Does your department have the same policy over there?
It works a little differently, and then the fact that I'm a lay Catholic, so I can't be an ordained minister, otherwise it'd be a clergy, you know, and there's not enough of them to go around, so that it's hard. I'm probably only one of 4 Catholic chaplains on the department, and so therein lies a need, because especially with the Hispanic population of deputies that we have, there are an abundance of Catholics, and sometimes people want to be, they want to go to a chaplain that of their own faith background, and not that we can't talk to anybody. I pride myself in being able to talk to people of different persuasion, denominations, and whatnot. But sometimes they want somebody who would really intimately know the background of their faith. So,
Ruben, do you guys have chaplains like from the Jewish faith, from the Muslim faith, from other faiths also? Because I know, how many chaplains you have? You have like 50 chaplains, right?
You know,
30 something.
Yeah, it's I think in the 30s, and
yeah,
we have the lead chaplain is Jewish, and then
is he a rabbi? Do you know if he's a rabbi?
I don't believe, you know, he might be. I haven't asked him. He might be. I think he is, but and then we have one Muslim chaplain. So the rest are pretty much all Christian chaplains, and again, like I said, about 4 Catholic chaplains.
Ruben, tell us about the fire. During the fire, we were on the phone once when I was getting ready for my interview with the Hillsborough County Sheriffs, and you were on your way to the fires to work as a chaplain. Can you share with our audience that experience?
Well, the guys were getting deployed, and so they had to go up to a command post up in Sylmar, and they're all meeting up there, and it was just a way of going up there and showing them that we appreciated what they're doing. They were already working long hours, and you know, all the days off were canceled, so that we call it 12 and 12s. You're on 12 hours, off 12 hours. But there was some issues that were coming up with people not getting relieved on time, so they were doing more than 12 hours, and you know, they were worn out. And again, a few chaplains went up there to go let them know, hey, we appreciate them. If they need anything, you know, I took them some energy drinks, and I was blown away because I saw so many people that I knew, guys from narcotics, guys that had come up. I knew them as young deputies, and now they're seasoned deputies, and people with rank now, sergeants, lieutenants now, that I knew when they were just young deputies, and it was just like old home week, and a lot of them didn't know I was a chaplain, so it was great because they drew a lot from detective division because they're not getting calls, so it's easier for them to break them to the fires because they're not having to answer calls on patrol. So there was a big contingent of detective division out there from OSS, our gang unit, and narcotics. So it was really good.
Ruben, how many times a week? I want to get into the meat of it, but I just want people to get a foundation before we talk about today's episode. Just a foundation. What is it that you guys do? Do you guys go? We had the other gentleman with us, I believe 3 weeks ago. He's
Fred.
been volunteering for Fred Durst for over 30 years, and he talked about it. I showed some pictures of him being in the patrol car, counseling the officers, responding to hot calls, literally going hands-on at one time. He mentioned, tell us the life before we get into the meat of the matter. Tell us the life of a chaplain.
Well, the minimum requirement is 16 hours a month, which isn't very much at all. And, I find myself reaching out to talking to people on the phone, sending emails back and forth. Sometimes I'll go to the station and I won't go on a ride. I'll just hang out at the station and just talk with the guys there. And just, again, it's a ministry of presence. And then again, like this week, probably tomorrow, I'll be going to the station and going on a ride. And, I try to ride with different people all the time, and just go out there and just be an extra set of eyes for them. Just, to be able to just converse with them, get to know them, build the trust up. And, it's good to be back in the neighborhood because, it's kind of surreal. Obviously, having worked there so many years, probably half my career was in East LA in different assignments, but just to be able to remember, I remember we handled this here. Now, I don't go out there and tell war stories. I'm not, I don't want to sound like I know it all. Because but in my mind, I'm thinking, man, I remember that happened here. And it takes me way back. And I'm just proud of these guys that they made the decision to join the department, to give of potentially give their life, and it's not lost on me that there is still danger. Now I'm issued a Kevlar vest and wear a chaplain's jacket. And
is that the jacket that you wear? You wear a Kevlar vest underneath it or on top of it,
yeah,
Ruben?
Underneath it. Yeah. So, I'm not trying to identify as a deputy, but I just let them know that, hey, if something happens, I'll be here for you, and then, I went and picked up a radio. So I have a radio on, so at least I can hear the calls. And most chaplains don't have a radio. And so it's good because then, I'm engaged in what they're doing, and being able to know where I'm at in the car is good. And they respect that, the fact that I'm an extra set of eyes, and they can, sometimes they'll just bounce things off me. Hey, when back in the day, did you do, how did you handle this call or that call, and it's nice. And some of the guys that I've already have established relationships with because they played soccer for me as the soccer coach. So, but it varies. So, I'm probably putting in about altogether the hours, and it's not just writing, but like I said, phone calls, reaching out to people, and probably about, 25 to 32 hours a month.
Hey, Ruben, Bobby, do you have any questions you want to ask about the chaplaincy program?
No, just I was able to see it with Phoenix PD. We had Father Phil. He had a small Byzantine church that he served. He was a pastor for many years, but he was one of our chaplains, and he covered the precinct that I worked out of. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, critical incidents, I used to think, does the guy ever sleep? Officer involved shootings, he was there. And a lot of people don't realize how valuable they are until there is a critical incident. That's when you really need some of these guys, especially in today's climate. This is why I think it's so important what you're doing, Ruben. Today's climate, we just came out at Phoenix with a new use of force policy, and you read it, and then the acting chief we have right now, who poll came out from our union, our members, he had I think an 8% approval rating. That's it. And the use of force, if it stands the way he recommended, he's going to get officers hurt or killed. It's sad, but no, that's all. I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm a firm believer that we need more. We had a really good core of chaplains with Phoenix PD. They had them assigned by precincts, I knew Father Phil came from my precinct in downtown.
Hey, Ruben, as the detective sergeant, I mean, you started as a sergeant on patrol, at least us. No matter where you're at, you always go back to patrol for a year, 2 years, and then you go back to as a detective sergeant, internal affairs, gangs, or wherever. Mm-hmm. You went to gangs. Have you responded as a chaplain to any hot calls, any critical incidents? And you're there. I mean, it's who we are. You know what I mean? I mean, does it ever come to mind like, you know what, I think you might want to do this, you might want to do that, because you're on the outside looking in, and you ran hundreds of, if not, dozens of critical incidents, hot calls. Has that happened to you yet as a chaplain?
Not so much. I can't think of any really hot calls that we've responded to. I've come in after the fact, after there's been a deputy involved shooting, mm-hmm. But I wasn't out there when it happened. But I wanted to respond and let them know if I'm here, if they wanted to talk, we want somebody to, bounce some stuff off of them. And again, sometimes it's just they're knowing that I'm there. And a lot of them come up and say, hey, thank you for being here. Just it's a calming presence, I think, knowing that I'm there and they know I'm praying for them, and that's the main thing too. And when I get in the car with them, I say a prayer, and if they're comfortable with that, if not, I'll say it to myself and say it under my breath. But again, I'm not out there trying to preach to them unless they want to talk about it. And in many cases, we do talk about it.
Have you ever got into a car and then the officer tells you, hey, do you mind saying a prayer?
Yeah. That's happened.
Really? You know what, to me, I never had a chaplain. We didn't have chaplains ride with us. If one would have, that would have been the first thing out of my mouth. Do you mind saying a prayer? Just that double protection. But you know what? Right after this, we're going to get into the incident of the show. But before, chaplains, you mentioned that you have a radio. Do they teach the 30-plus chaplains, just say 30-plus chaplains, 30-plus chaplains how to use the radio? Do they teach them any type of police jargon? I mean, do they understand, cover now, 1199? I don't know if that's what you use, the 10 code, but do they understand what they're saying over the radio?
If they've been out there a while, they understand it. Again, there's probably not too many chaplains. They don't issue radios to chaplains, but I went up to the radio room and the sergeant there knew me. So he goes, oh, you're not going to mess up on the radio. So, so they trusted me with the radio. And so that works out great for me, because I don't like to be out there in the dark and not know what's going on if I'm away from the car, so I can hear the radio. But you know what? It's a perishable skill to be able to pick up the
really
radio, right? Yeah, because you're not out there hearing it all the time. Yeah. You miss things, it's amazing, wow, they're talking. It seems like they're talking fast now, in the back. When you're used to hearing it every day, it's no big deal. But when you stop using it and listening to it, it takes a while to really pick it up again.
This is a great question from Benny. Ruben, what the deputies tell you, is it considered confidential? Talking IA investigations, etc. Great question, Benny.
Talking to IA stuff to me?
No, I don't know why he mentioned IA, but let's just say what deputies tell you, in their personal lives, or if they're talking about an incident, is it considered confidential?
Oh yeah. Everything
Great question.
they talk to me about is confidential. They hold the privilege, unless they say, "Yeah, you can go ahead and talk about it." I there's no reason for me to talk about it. And in fact, I can't even go to if the commanding officer says, "Hey, did you talk to this guy about?" I can't divulge that. It's confidential.
So all the chaplains are held under the same rule.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of like the attorney-client privilege, like a priest confessor privilege.
Yeah.
So that's key. They need to know that, so they feel comfortable. That I would just lose all credibility, and I wouldn't be any good if I started talking to people about other people about what I've talked about.
Dispensa, Bobby, I didn't mean to cut you off, brother. Go ahead.
No, just it's funny you said what you talked about. I was when I went from patrol to undercover units. In undercover units, you're not running around with radios, because we were doing, not plain clothes, but real undercover work. And after 8 years of that, I went back to patrol for a while. And rookies are telling me now I had like a lot of experience. Hey, they're clearing you on the radio. I wasn't hearing it. I couldn't even understand what they were saying initially. So I laughed when you said that. It is so true.
Yeah. Now, a chaplain should be familiar with how to use the car radio, and most deputies would tell them, "Oh, if this happens, you can get on the radio. If I can't communicate, you can put something out." They should know where the shotgun button is to release the shotgun, and the deputy, ask the deputy how if they're not familiar with how to use the shotgun, then go ahead and show them, so that you never know when it's the fit's going to hit the shan, as they say.
Hey, Ruben, we have a question from Cocaine Cowboys, Chris Hastings, all the way from the Philippines, former CBP officer, ICE agent. The guy's great book, Cocaine Cowboys Uncensored. Even if they talk about suicide, is that confidential?
That's an exception, though. If they want to hurt themselves, do down or hurt others, then I've got to do something. Typically, send it upline to we call psych services, and because they also have confidentiality requirements too. So maybe we can get them some help without it going up the chain of command, and then maybe them getting reassigned or days off or you had a program on with a lady one time on your show where she came on. I remember you watching the show.
Yes.
And she was helping law enforcement. And so if you can avoid getting the brass involved, it's huge for the deputies, and the police officers. So
yeah. Great question, Chris. With that said, let's get into the subject matter. Before we get into the date, who was Chaplain Bruce Bryan? Why was his nickname Chaplain of the Hood?
Bruce Bryan was a chaplain at our Carson station back in the 90s. And Bruce was called Chaplain of the Hood because he would minister to people, even if they were, handcuffed, leaning against the hood of the radio car. And Bruce was tragically killed on a ride-along in June 18th, 1994. And I had heard about it back then. I was a patrol deputy working in East LA at the time. And I remember it going out. And but Bruce was beloved by his deputies out there. He would ride 2 or 3 times a week, they said. And he was, unlike the chaplains that we have now, he had a ministry, much like you had, David, before you became a CDC officer.
Like New Life Outreach, rehabilitation program for kids. Yeah,
exactly. He was ministering to troubled youth, guys that were coming out of youth authority or juvenile hall, and he would bring them into his own home, and so he knew a lot of the locals, and was really doing what he could between him and his fiance. They were helping a lot of these kids, and so he was beloved. And this guy, he was a ordained minister from Calvary Chapel, and his loss was very tragic to the department. And every June 18th, as you can see in that picture at the top, that's a portrait of him, and that's a wreath. On his anniversary, the deputies, they all wear their Class A uniforms with ties, and they go 10-8, dressed up, and they honor him. And to go back,
so this guy was just a good person, man. I mean, he opens up his home, and what I read about him, I spent half the day today reading about him.
yeah.
I mean, this guy not only opened his home, opened his heart. He would take these kids for their job interviews. He would prepare them for their job interviews. They said, according to what I read, if they went to Wilmington, the gangsters knew him. If they went to Crenshaw, the gangsters knew him. I mean, this guy was like that Father Doyle, is it, from there in LA. I mean, this guy, he wasn't this, everybody knew him because you know what? The guy just loved the community, loved to help gangsters. And then before the incident, within weeks, he was going to get married. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you mentioned the fiance, talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, he was from, I spoke to the deputy involved in this incident, and I'll talk about him afterwards. But Bruce was fixing to get married in just a couple of weeks from the incident, and it was a tremendous loss for his whole family, and including his fiance, and it left a big hole in their hearts, and it was hard to come to grips with somebody who was trying to do the Lord's work. And then
did you ever meet him, Ruben? Did you ever meet him?
No. I never met him. It was years, like I said, 1994. I was still, I'd only been out of East LA patrol for a few years at that point. So I had.
So now we go to June 18th, 1994. What happened? Who's he with? And what is he doing?
Yes. I had the privilege of meeting Terrence Wenger, affectionately called Terry Wenger, at Narcotics when I was a sergeant there, just probably 2015, and he came to Narcotics, and he was preparing to get promoted to lieutenant. So they brought him there. He was kind of doing a lot of different odds and ends things with asset forfeiture and different jobs around our headquartered narcotics unit. And I know, and everybody knew that Terry had lost an eye, and this is something you don't speak about, you don't ask him about it. And but I had heard stories that he was the deputy that was with the chaplain who had been killed. As much as I wanted to ask him, I just couldn't, and I couldn't find myself to do. But I did strike up a relationship with Terry, and I found him to be one of the nicest guys I've ever met on the department. Terry was just, he had a sense of humor. He has a sense of humor that's just really dry, and it's he's very smart and witty, and but he's also deeply involved in his faith. And a couple of weeks ago, when I was thinking about when you were telling me about coming on the show, I reached out to Terry and I called him, and we're both retired now. In fact, he's married to a beautiful young woman that's in the pastry industry. She makes cakes, and she made my cake at my retirement party. It was a big, beautiful cake with the deputy had a Beretta 92F made on the front of the cake, and sheriff stars, and it was really well done. And she did it for my wife's retirement, and she's fantastic. And but Terry and I struck up this conversation, and and I asked him, if you don't mind, would you feel comfortable telling me the story? And we spoke for a couple of hours, and Terry said that when you hear about those programs where they say the 10 deadliest mistakes that police officers make. He goes, I made them all. He says, he still carries it in his heart. He feels bad that under his watch that Bruce died and he wasn't there to protect him. He'll always live with that. But Terry was a lukewarm Catholic back then, and he told me that his that night he's a one-man car working City of Carson, and his sister car, his partner, I believe I sent you a picture of him.
Yes.
His name is Bryce Rennick. That guy was always there for him. There's a picture there with showing with Terry wearing the patch over his injured eye. Well, that was Bryce there next to him. Excuse me.
Hey,
Bryce,
Ruben, for those that don't know Los Angeles, can you tell them where Carson is? Is that where the incident occurred, Carson area?
Yeah, it's out in the South Bay, out near Torrance, near Wilmington, San Pedro, that area.
Okay.
So Bryce wasn't there that day. He was off on his days off, and but they did everything together. They would back each other up, and they made sure that they were safe. And it's a contract city, so they're driving around one-man cars. So he responded, and he had the chaplain with him to a bar fight. And the deputy said that this guy was turned out to be the suspect. Derek Eugene Pettis was, intoxicated. He was kind of rousing up he's a black blood gang member that hung out with the Samoans, a Samoan gang. And he was getting into it with the Hispanics. So anyway, he went on his way, and no sooner did they get another call. Terry got another call to go to this other location where he was arguing with a female. So realizing it's the same guy, Terry says, okay, look, I'm just going to do you a favor. I'm going to take you home. And rather than this guy being grateful, he was just MFing Terry the whole time. And Terry put him in the backseat of his car, handcuffed, and was driving him to his apartment out in Wilmington, which is LAPD's area. And they're driving out there. Terry says that he said, F you, F you, deputy, F you. And he said, F you, Bruce. And Terry remembers thinking, how do you know this guy? Well, everybody knew Bruce because if he was a youthful offender, Bruce probably had contact with him when they got out. And so he was even telling Terry, I'm going to kill you when I get out. And Terry said, I people tell me that all the time, but it never happens. So when he stopped at about a block away from the location, he got out of the car and took Pettis out of the car and uncuffed him. And he turned his head. And that's when Pettis cold cocked him and knocked him out, knocked him to the ground. And Pettis reached down and took his Beretta 92F out of his holster and fired 4 or 5 times at Terry. Thank God, only one round struck him, and it went through his bridge of his nose and through his right eye, and he took out his eye. But he was there left for dead. And then Pettis turned his attention on Chaplain Bruce and took a shot at the radio car. This is, Terry doesn't remember anything after getting cold cocked, but he was a witness told him this later on, or he heard the testimony in court, and he shot at the radio car. Bruce got out, tried to run at him to tell him stop. No, I'm not a deputy, and the suspect shot Bruce. And when he was on the ground, he did the coup de grace on the back of his head and killed him, and then ran towards his this apartment he was staying at. And there was a Hispanic, a little drunk there that was a little Juanito, I should say, we just sitting on the curb and saw the whole thing. And there happened to be 2 vice officers, LAPD vice officers down the street on an operation. They saw the headlights. They didn't know it was a police car, but they heard the gunshots and they rolled down there. So they were able to apprehend him rather quickly, and he went into custody. And Terry was rolled to UCLA Medical Center in Torrance, and by the grace of God, he survived the attack. And most people thought that would be the end of his career. In fact, the department was kind of moving in that direction. And Terry relayed to me that there was the sheriff at the time was Sherman Block, and one of his assistant sheriffs, or his undersheriff, I believe was one of his assistant sheriffs, had lost an eye himself due to cancer, and they let him stay on the department. So he fought for Terry to remain on the department, and ran it by the sheriff to keep him on. And he was off work. Terry was off work for at least a year, recovering a number of plastic surgeries and major reconstruction to his face. And they took care of him, and thank God they did, because Terry would have really not fared well, because he didn't have that many years on at the time. But he was able to complete his career and get a medical retirement, and I think he said he worked backgrounds for a number of years because it wasn't too strenuous. But eventually, when he promoted to sergeant, he had to go out in the field, and he did so. But Terry really, his faith really flourished after this. He realized that he needed to change. He needed to be ready when that day when the Lord's calling him. And it's amazing to see the man he has become, and that he didn't let this get him down. I mean, I'm sure he went through a lot, but what really struck me is the fact that he told me, and I had no knowledge of this, that it took 20 years. And he knew, because of his faith, that he had to forgive this guy. And he's a bigger man than I might have been, just think about it. A man who tried to kill you, and now you're forgiving him. And
not only that, but a man that assassinated a man of God, a man of the community, an innocent man. Yeah. I mean, wow. So tell us about that, Ruben.
Yeah. Terry sent me the letter that he wrote to Governor Gavin Newsom, as this guy was coming up for parole. In fact, I'll backtrack it. It was, the law, this youthful offender law came into play because somehow they determined that children's brains are not fully developed until they're into their 20s. And they came up with this thing. If it happened,
and this is under your former DA, George Gascon, correct?
No, this was years ago. This was
before George Gascon. Yeah,
the parole that just came up recently, under Gascon, correct?
Yeah,
right. So they revised it to be from 18 to 23, and then they revised it to 26. The killer at the time was 24, and so they applied the status retroactively, and so he was up for parole. He was granted that, but the governor still had the right to override it, and that's why we reached out to the governor to squash it. And it's probably the best thing that Governor Newsom has done since he's been in office, and he did in fact do that. And Terry wrote, and with his permission, he gave me this what he wrote. I'll just read a portion of it. And he says, when he writes to the governor, he says that I'll say that after approximately 20 years, I wrote to Pettis at his prison address from my work address. In the letter, I offered him my forgiveness. Having been raised in a Catholic home and attended Catholic schools, I understood the importance of forgiveness and realized I needed to let him know. My father reminded me that forgiveness is an act of mercy, but added it does not contradict the need for justice. It certainly wasn't easy to write that letter, as you can see. It took many years. A few months later, I received a letter back from Mr. Pettis thanking me and expressing his regret. A few additional letters were exchanged, at which he told me how he was trying to better himself and I sent him my encouragement. As an aside, I received a bit of negativity from my friends regarding this act of forgiveness, expressing how unbelievable it was I would do this, and thinking I imagine I had lost my mind, but that is what I did, and I stand by that act. It's by the grace of God. That's God acting in his life. He said, I did mention in the letter to the parole board that I personally did not object to his release. I want to provide some clarification. Nothing in that statement or in my act of forgiveness should be misconstrued as I was actively advocating for release. Nothing could be further from the truth. My statement of non-objection was just a way, I suppose, of saying if he did get released, I would not let it affect me in any way. My own life would not change whether he was released or not. And I suppose I just did not want to think of all this anymore. But I must, not just for what happened to me, but for the effect this tragedy perpetrated on Mr. Pettis has had and continues to have on my wife and family, as well as Chaplain Bruce's family, fiance, and all those whose lives he touched. So, it goes on, but, at the end, he says that he's not advocating for his release. And, but that's a bigger man right there. What Terry did, and it's an act of God that he would, he's imitating Christ, Christ on the cross, looking down at those who were persecuting him. What did he say? He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I believe it was St. Augustine that said, how could you look up at the cross, at the crucifix, and see what Jesus did for you and not forgive your brother? And I often thought of that when, and then when Terry did this, I read his letter. I was like, man, that's heavy, So just recently he came up for parole, I believe like last week, and Terry said that it was again shot down. So he's not eligible to come up to for another 3 years. But at some point, he may get out, and he's done about 30 years now. So there's a lot of people getting out of prison. The so-called life without parole. It doesn't seem to be going that way anymore. I think you've talked about it on your shows, but yeah, people are getting out. Yeah.
Man, Bobby, that is heavy, man. That is heavy. Bobby, any comments about it, Bobby? Bobby, I think you got to unmute yourself, Bobby.
I had muted myself because my dog was giving me a hard time earlier. He was barking at me, or who knows what. Yeah. I wanted to add is that I've talked about it on this show. I did an interview today for a Fox News reporter that came here. We talked about a lot of the crime, the illegal alien crime that we have here. But one of the things is that when my old partner, I don't know if Saul Ayala is listening, our old undercover partner, DEA agent who was put on his knees and executed during a drug rip, I went to the parole hearing for one of his murderers. And, he said the same thing, I've turned my life over to God and everything else. Hey, God bless. Maybe he can minister to other inmates while he's in there. But the crime that they did, I believe, on my side is like, hey, I looked at we saw him on the screen. Hey, we forgive you, and we hope it's sincere. But also, I think we have an obligation to protect, not only protect our community from people that did this type of crime. They went there with the intention of ripping them off, and had, as Richard begged for his life, they emptied a 45 into him point blank as he was on his knees. And so yeah, that's really hard. But I had a relative of mine that was involved in crime his whole life. He was in prison. He was never going to get out. He got like 256 years in prison. He would have got out with good behavior in 2136 or something like that. Well, he got cancer and he died in prison. When I was still working the MA, I secretly went over and visited him a few times while I was doing MA interviews in SMU2. And I talked to him and we prayed. And, I believe he had handed his life over to, turned his life over to Christ, but there was no way he was ever going to get out. And I felt at peace when he finally died. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And yes, we do have to forgive, but also we have to protect our communities as well.
I agree.
Hey, Ruben, I don't think I've ever heard a story of a chaplain, a man of God, being shot or executed. One of the things that I read, and I think you had mentioned it, but I read it today, that when he ran, when the incident occurred, that he was on his knees begging for his life. And this guy came up and he knew he had a vest, so he shot him in the back with the coup de grace between the vest and his back. He begged for his life. You know what I mean? I'm sure that he was thinking of his wife or his fiance. And here's a man of God. You know what I mean? An innocent man of God.
Right.
I don't think I've ever heard of that. Have you guys heard of any chaplain on duty dying like that?
I have not. So,
No.
that's one of the dangers that, when you go out there, that's a possibility. So you have to keep that in your mind as a chaplain,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's heavy.
You're still on the front line.
Yeah. And the legend continues. The legend continues, brother. You know what? You were a legend with the sheriff's department. You were literally, everybody that I talked, Ruben Nava. Oh, I haven't heard one person talk bad about you except, no, I'm kidding. I have not heard one person, dude. And you know what? A lot of people after they retire, they can't find what to do. And one of the things that I admire the most about you, Ruben, is the legend continues. You found a calling. You found a purpose. And I tried to follow after your footsteps, but I wasn't accepted. But I'm doing other things. I'm writing a book right now on police shootings. On school shootings, on how PTSD affects the students, affects the teachers. And I'm doing a case study on the Uvalde shooting and the Parkview shooting. So that's taking a lot of my time. So if I can't be a chaplain, at least I'm doing something by helping people suffering from PTSD, including students and teachers now with my new book coming out hopefully next year or so. So, but you found purpose, you know what I mean? And brother, man, the legend continues.
Well, I appreciate that. But, based on the guests that you have in here, I'm no legend. So
no, brother. Yes, you are. The legend continues. And you know what? We pray for you. We pray for all the chaplains that are out there. I had never heard this story. At San Diego PD, we had never heard about a chaplain. And then once I read about him being a good person and then being murdered the way he did, you know what, brother? My respect to you. Be safe out there. We pray for you and all the other chaplains that are out there. Thank you. Thank you very much for your service, brother.
Thank you for prayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We were going to go somewhere else with this, but you know what? I'm going to hold on that. The Lord's going to show me when we need to go. With that said, Bobby, any last words for Ruben?
No, the work, like I said, the work that you guys do as chaplains, it just flashed into my mind. When Saul Ayala was shot, he was in Saul and I were friends since high school. He followed me onto Phoenix PD, and here I go to the hospital. I see his mom and dad. Saul is not, he's in the room. He's just came out of surgery, and I am feeling some guilt, unbelievable guilt. I see his parents. I almost felt as if they were gonna, echarme la culpa. It's your fault our son got shot. No, his dad was a pastor himself. He came over, and the first thing out of his mouth, don't blame yourself. Saul, he wanted this. He told me in Spanish. And all of a sudden I turn around and I see the chaplain at the time. I felt like a child. It was emotional. I see the child, I see the chaplain. I felt like I was just going to break down by seeing him. Like, I felt like a child wanting to cry when I see a parent, because I felt so guilty. I felt it was my fault that Saul was in there, face all swollen up and everything else. And obviously he survived. But I think you guys just do incredible work, and we should all forever be thankful for the work and dedication you do, time away from your family, to continue serving, and not only serving our communities, but serving the Lord. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank Terry for his service in the department, not quitting and becoming the man that he has become. And he's either watching this live or he will watch it. He had a doctor's appointment today, so I don't know if he got back in time. But Terry, you're a legend. You know,
he is.
For you to
absolutely, absolutely.
You know what, Ruben? Maybe you could put me in contact with him, me or Bobby, and I would love to have him on our show. I would love. I mean, a man like that God's grace. I mean, like Gordo Gordito. He's getting ready to retire next month after 30 plus years with the Chicago Police Department. Matter of fact, these next 2 weeks will be his last 2 weeks with Chicago PD, and he said it. He hit the nail on the head, man. The grace of God,
right?
You know, the grace of God. Yeah.
You know, like when I told the story about Jerry Ortiz and how I looked at his killer in the eyes and at the county jail, and I wanted to sock him up, you know, and I shut down, but it was only the grace of God that allowed me. I said, Lord, I can't forgive him on my own. I can't do it, you know, but you can. I can't, but you can, you know, and he helped me get through it. And so this is a lesson learned for a lot of us, that, you know, sometimes we hold on to things even less than this. You know, we hold on to grudges or even our spouses. You know, they say something that might offend you, or, you know, come on, you know, life's too short, and we shouldn't. You know, Scripture says that you don't let the sun go down on your anger.
Your anger,
right? So make up. You know.
Big Joe 67. I believe he's a correctional captain, lieutenant up in Soledad in one of those prisons up there. You read my mind, Big Joe. Mr. Nava, thank you for your years of service. Maybe you should have your wife share her law enforcement experience as a woman you forgot to mention, on Ash Wednesday.
Yeah, I asked her. She's thinking about it, but, you know.
Yeah, whenever she's ready, we would love to have her on. And Ceci, our sister from Riverside, what an amazing interview. Thank you for everything you do. And it goes on. Jim, watching us from Thailand. Thank you, Ruben, for sharing this heartbreaking story. I told you guys it was going to be a heartbreaker, but you know what? Above and beyond, God is great. God is faithful. God is always faithful. Man, deep, deep. Brother, thank you. Mil gracias once again, brother. And you're our chaplain. So we are on each episode. I'm going to start putting a little reminder. If you need prayers, let us know, and then I'll be reaching out to you, brother, so you could say prayers for our people. Is that all right?
That's fine. That's great. Love it.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, and God bless you, man.
God bless you. Thanks for having me.
God bless you. Thank you. Man, Bobby, when I was reading about this, about the gentleman, the chaplain, oh my God. I mean, and then and Ruben was him and I had talked about it. He was a little more explicit in our conversation, how he was literally on his knees begging for his life. You know what I mean? And this guy just came up and just murdered him. And for this officer, or for this, I don't know if he retired as a lieutenant or not, for him to offer forgiveness. I mean, it just shows you that God's grace is big. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, brother, you know what? This next week, we're going to have a great episode. We got Fernando Puente. Those of you that, if you get a chance, you want to know about what's going on right now in Tijuana between Cartel Nueva Generación Jalisco, between the Arellano Felix remnants, because it's not a cartel. Well, I guess it still is, but the remnants, and with Sinaloa, Chapitos, and Mayitos. Watch this podcast. It's called El Borde. Watch Hector Bravo's the prison guard, Unhinged. Watch, he interviewed him, and it was an outstanding interview Well, Fernando Puente is going to be on with us next week, and he's going to talk about everything that happened in the past. He just did a great episode on where he called it El Señor Siete. Basically, talks about Benjamin Arellano and El Tigrillo, Javier Arellano, when they met in a secret prison to basically, Javier was trying to convince Benjamin, this just happened about 6 years ago, was trying to convince him to cooperate with the U.S. government as an informant. And Benjamin basically said no. They sentenced him to 25 years. But it's called El Bordo podcast. It's an excellent podcast. He has a lot of interesting guests, and he's going to be with us next week. And Bobby, I know he's going to be reaching out to you. He's already reached out to me for us to be a guest on his podcast, El Bordo. I can't wait. It's going to be great. We're going to touch thousands of people. I think he has like 45,000 people watching his show on a daily basis. But he's going to be with us next week. So any questions that you have on what's going on in Mexico, especially Tijuana, those of you, we have a lot of people watching from San Diego. He's going to give us up-to-date information. It's going to be an outstanding episode. Outstanding. And on the gray line, the story behind the blue line, we have a former lieutenant with detective sergeant with the LAPD. He's been on our show before, and he's going to talk about police shootings. He's an expert on police shootings, internal affairs. So it's going to be a great episode. I can't wait, Bobby. Next week, it's going to be your cup of tea. It's all about narcotics, bro. So it's going to be outstanding, man.
I love it.
Yeah.
Right after I came back from Mexico in 2017, I started writing for Breitbart News, the Cartel Chronicles. I was one of their paid contributors. 2.5 years. I wrote about 600 articles for them in 2.5 years. I'm guessing 200 of them were about Tijuana. And I knew about Tijuana because I was reading a lot of the intel items that were coming out when I was in Mexico. But I'm telling you, I started digging in. I had a couple of sources that helped me out with people from the State Attorney General's office there in Baja, there in Tijuana. And after a while, I was like, oh my God, it was a killing field. It still is.
Yeah,
they had,
it still is.
I think, close to 2,000 homicides last year alone. And one of the high years when I was writing about it, they had 2,514 in what is considered the metro area of Tijuana. And every year they're killing nearly 1,500, 2,000, 2,500. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some additional information because it's just totally out of control. It's a killing field.
Yeah. Bobby, any last words for people that are watching the show tonight?
No, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in as always. And, we're a family here. Somos familia. And thanks for joining us again. Our sister, there, Ceci. Un abrazo.
Yes. Un abrazo and prayers. You're absolutely right for all of our Latino family. And with that said, like I always say, you know what? Live a purpose-driven life. Live every day like it's your last day on earth. But today I'm going to change it up. I always talk about you're saying, Bobby, the one that that doctor told your son, trust the process, trust the author. But today, just know that God is faithful. You know what? God is faithful. No matter what you're going through, whether it's good or it's bad, trust God because God is faithful. With that said, we will see you, God willing, next week with El Borde. It's going to be a great episode. And thank you, and God bless you.
God bless.
Used to spend my nights out in ballroom. Liquor was the only love I'd known. But you rescued me from reaching for the bottom and brought me back, being too far gone. Your restless scared.